Welcome to Into the Words, a podcast from the Highlights Foundation Retreat Center. Today in the cabin are our dear friends, Baptiste and Miranda Paul. Welcome.
Thank you for
Thanks for having us.
Such a treat to have a husband and wife team here. So we're so glad to have you here as part of the nuts and bolts of science writing. And Miranda, maybe you could start and just talk a little bit about the workshop. I know you've been doing it for a number of years and what you're talking about this week.
This is our 5th year of the nuts and bolts of science or STEM writing workshop at Highlights. And I do a lot of the talks on craft for writing very creative science, also maybe some of the softer sciences, things that people don't necessarily think of as being science. They think more of nature or being outdoors or, human biology, that sort of thing, but mostly for the younger kids. So, take age 11 and under, your elementary school age. And I talk a lot about format, about thinking about the structure of the physical book, because a lot of our attendees are very interested in science or have a PhD or decades of experience in the lab or in the field, but not always a lot of knowledge about the physical book format and how to take their vast knowledge of different areas of science and translate that into something that non-science lovers or children who are curious can understand, and then thinking about putting those words on the physical page.
And what was it yesterday? We were talking about rhythm and lyricism. I know at breakfast you were mentioning a little bit of that.
Yeah, we talked a lot about rhythm and about being lyrical, not necessarily rhyming your work, but thinking about how things sound, because most picture books especially are meant to be read aloud, or a lot of science and STEM books are used in the classroom, and so at some point inevitably they're read aloud by a teacher or by another student. And it's important to think about the cadence of your words, even if you're not a poet or you consider what you're writing poetic, because today, students can Google almost anything they need, and to get information in an encyclopedia type of format, that's easy for them to do. That's already available. So when we write books, we are delivering that content in a way that maybe the internet can't provide it for them, and we're sort of translators in a way, and we need to make that engaging. And we need to be able to compete with all these other media that are vying for the children's attention.
Baptiste, so this is your first visit to the Highlights Foundation. Welcome.
Oh, thank you.
I'm so glad that you were able to come. Talk about, what will you be talking about here at the Nuts and Bolts?
Yeah, tomorrow I'll focus my talk on write what you know. And Miranda mentioned it briefly. We have a lot of science people here, science writers, people who have PhDs and a lot of expertise in a lot of complicated science, and trying to get them to boil that down to a level accessible to kids, especially the STEM kids who just want to learn more about our world and how things really work and things function. So tomorrow I'll be focusing a lot on just write what you know, use your own experiences to deliver a really impactful story that can engage kids.
Great. All right. Let's talk about you as authors. So Baptiste, start a little bit. I see you have a book here with you, The Field.
Yeah, this is my debut book. It's basically an ode to my childhood, growing up on the island of St. Lucia in the Caribbean, where play was the central theme of everything I did, simply because I grew up in poverty, and this was my escape, my reality from growing up in poverty, because when I played, I did not have to think about not having food or going to school without shoes. So that's just who I am. I'm just a fun guy who just loves to play. So I include that in my writing, and yeah.
Sounds like a great book. Play, fun. That's what we
Yeah.
need.
I think it's why we like coming to this, or why I like coming to this workshop anyways. We get a lot of nonfiction writers here who assume that nonfiction doesn't include emotion or a piece of themselves. And I want to unlock and just dispel that myth, because all the more reason, if you're coming with all this information at kids, all the more reason to find an emotional hook or a universal theme or a way to make that information relate directly to their lives. So to find a connection like that. And so we have books that, fiction and nonfiction, that have stemmed from our own memories, stem from who we are, what we know, whether it's culturally or things we've been interested in academically. And the key for us in picture books is to find an emotional way in to that child, to relate, so they say, wow, this story about this topic is actually like the story of me, or I'm like that, or I've done that. Some way relate it to the child and or the family.
I like that. Talk a little bit, Miranda. You have a pile of books here with you. Talk about some of them or something.
It's incredible to me, because when I first came here, I didn't have any books. I came here as a student to the Highlights Foundation. I was just learning about writing nonfiction biographies. This year, I'll see the publication of my 14th book. And yeah, it's really awesome. Fiction, nonfiction. I've gone on to publish nonfiction picture book biographies, which was what I originally came here to study. And I am so happy about all of them. They're quite varied. I have a lot, of course, that are science or nature and environment related, but I also have a number that are social studies related, whether it's social justice, geography, culture. And this fall, I'll be debuting as an editor for Thank You, Poems of Gratitude. So I edited 33 other children's poets and authors and put together a collection of poems on the theme of gratitude.
Oh, wow.
And it's illustrated by Marlena Miles and published by Lerner. And Carol Hintz is here this year as one of our faculty. And so something that I'm talking about in one of my talks later on this week is about collaboration. Baptiste and I obviously have collaborated as co-authors, but every time you make a picture book, it's a collaboration with an illustrator and an art director. But now as an editor, I've sort of been the overseer of this 33-person project that will benefit We Need Diverse Books.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes.
And talk about this collaboration piece between the two of you. Has this been going on a long time, or?
Yeah, it's been a while though. Our first book did not get published. We got close, but it was just not the right thing at the right time. But we've been writing books for a while. And the first one we got published together is this one over here. It's called Adventures to School, and it's 13 stories, unique, extraordinary stories of kids around the world and how they get to school. And part of what I'm going to talk about tomorrow is the relatability aspect of how you can translate your experience and how you can relate to other kids' experiences. For me as a child, like I walked to school barefoot, walking on blacktop roads with the tar sticking under your feet with the rocks. So you basically got to school with a lot of picking rocks under your feet. So I can relate to some of the kids in this book, like how hard and how difficult some of the journeys to school are. So I'll be talking a little bit about that tomorrow as well. And our next one was I Am Farmer, the story of Farmer Tantoh. He's a Camaroonian environmentalist who has saved close to 50,000 people's lives for access to clean water, sustainable agriculture, farming practices. He's just an amazing man. And Miranda and I flew to Cameroon to do research on that book, because we felt that it wouldn't be right if we did not go to Cameroon and see the places where he worked, meet the people, and do the interviews to actually do that book. We wanted to live the experience. Mm-hmm. We wanted to sleep the same way he slept. We wanted to eat the same foods he ate, simply because it's authentic, it's genuine, it's true. And in the book, we took all the photos just to show the kids that Yes, these authors did travel over there. They sacrificed their families, their kids, in order to take real photos and write this book and make it true so the kids have this direct connection to some of the people in the book and the places in the book. Do you have anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess you're touching a little bit on another thing that we talk about this week, which is research, where when you don't know something, you start with writing what you know, but when you don't know something, how do you go about finding that out? And how do you go about finding that out authentically, especially when it's not just a fact you're researching? Maybe it's something cultural, or maybe you're the first person to sort of write about this topic or this person or a place that people don't know about. And you come on board with a responsibility to get that as accurate as you can. And that's something we talk about, and I think our experiences with the books that we've published, we're able to sort of answer that for people. They don't always like the answers because it's a lot of years, a lot of dollars in research, a lot of time, and sometimes you get to the point in your research when you realize this really isn't my story to tell, or I'm not really getting the answers that I want, and you abandon a project sometimes, and that happens, and that's happened to so many writers where we just pass on a project or say that this isn't right for me. I feel like it has to really be calling you. You have to be invested. You have to be involved in the story in some way, and so people ask me sometimes, like, how did we find Farmer Tantoh, or how did I find Aissatou Cisse? But the truth is, we were just living our lives the way they are, and these were people whose stories intersected ours in an organic way, and these people have become part of our lives. Me through teaching in Gambia before, and while I was there teaching, came upon these plastic bags, and that's a 12-year story in and of itself. And so people, when they ask me, well, you got to write this book about this cool place, like, I want to do that too. And they take out their notepad and ask, how can I do that? And I say, well, you got to live your life, just live your life. And the stories that are meant to be your stories will kind of find you. Don't necessarily go looking for them, because then you're always an outsider because you were looking for it from the beginning.
Just to add a little bit onto that, I agree 100% that you just need to go out and live your life, and the stories will find you. And in the process of living your life, pay attention to all the people around you and stay connected with them. Because this book, Adventures to School, would not have happened without our friends and connections we have all around the world. We had so many people in so many different countries helping us with the research for this book, because we could not physically be there. And some of the stories in here had to be pulled out last minute because we found out that the situation changed and it's not fact anymore. So we had to put it in the back of the book. So I'm just going to show you. This is just the select bibliography for this book. The rest is online. For a picture book, this is extensive. Okay. And on the front right here
the front is even more telling. Yes. These are acknowledgments. So these are people that have been part of our life for some of them decades, who live all over the world. And so when we needed someone on the ground translating, in Indonesia or wherever, because we can't read the local newspaper, we had people, in our digital Rolodex, that we could call up and say, hey, can you translate this for us? Is it saying what we think it's saying according to the pictures in the article? And they would send us translations, or go and talk with kids on the ground that we couldn't communicate with directly. Because, we can't, this is 13 kids from around the world.
Speak the languages.
We don't speak all the
Vietnam,
languages, and we weren't able, as much as we would love to have gone to all 13, the publisher didn't have that big of a research budget for us.
Yeah.
So we couldn't go everywhere.
And for our listeners who aren't able to see you holding the book, the acknowledgments is basically the full page of text acknowledging all those people.
Yes.
And the bibliography was 2 columns. It looked like 8-point font.
And the rest is online.
And plus you have an additional
online
piece.
as well, yes.
So showing again the research and the amount of time and effort and teamwork it took to do the research.
And yet we wouldn't have been able to do that without all of the connections and things that we already knew prior to going into this. Like, we knew kids who had some of these journeys. We knew families. We had traveled to some of these places. We wouldn't have been able to do it without the things that we knew ahead of time. It just wouldn't have been a project we ever would have said yes to.
That's when our our agent called us and said, I know two people who would take on this project. Yeah, I guess we were pretty crazy enough to do it because it was from like a sun up to sundown project. And we devoted an entire room of our home to research this book. From wall to wall. We had papers strung from wall to bottom.
Photos taped on the wall, video files that were sent to us.
Just one room for research.
So talk a little bit about what does your writing process or practice look like?
Well, we're also parents. I mean, we're also parents, and so to say that we have a process where we wake at 8:45 and we sip our tea for 15 minutes and then everything goes to a schedule would be really disingenuous to say that. So just like if there's any parents out there listening, every day can look different, and that's okay. It's really okay to sort of be flexible. So we had some very late night sessions. You know, the kids would be in bed, and at 11:30, we're going, okay, let's nail down which 13 countries of these 21 that we've sort of reached out and found kids on the ground, which ones of these are going to be different. You know, there might be two that the kids are going in a boat, so we don't necessarily want to have two boat stories, or something like that. So we would have some of these late night sessions. We would be working in the house at the same time in different rooms and texting each other.
A lot of the time we did it in separate rooms and texting each other back and forth information.
For time purposes, I mean, we had a pretty tight deadline because the longer you work on a book like this, the longer you have that things are going to change while you're working on it. Right. So we had to work on this in the span of several months, which is short for a book, for any of our books. So in order to sort of get a snapshot of all these kids in one semester, we had to be constantly working on this project. Like during this project, we were pretty much working on this project.
Non-stop,
But that's not normally
how we do things,
We normally have multiple projects that we juggle.
Yeah, like Miranda said, because we're parents, it's so different. Every single day is completely different in our world. Sometimes school comes with, there's a priority at school with the children, so we need to drop whatever we're doing. I tend to like working at night a little bit.
I work well in the morning.
Yeah, she works in the morning, I work at night. And I enjoy writing in the basement a lot because it's cold, dingy, mysterious. And that's kind of works really well with my brain.
I prefer being in the sunroom with all windows where I can see outside and feel like a sort of on Walden Pond or something.
And when you're doing a collaboration project, do you outline together, or does one take kind of the lead on the outline and then you go do your thing, or is it a heavy collaboration throughout?
We outline a lot together.
Before we even start the project, we outline and we kind of divvy it up when it comes to like really heavy research, and then we come back to the table and we discuss our findings and our research, and then we start the process of writing.
Yeah.
Switch gears to I'm Farmer. Talk about, you just were on tour for the month of May. Explain a little bit about that.
We actually were on a 10-week tour.
I'm tired.
So Farmer Tantoh and Forba, who's an environmentalist and founder of Save Your Future Association, came to the U.S. And we toured 9 states?
9 states.
I think 9 states.
9 states.
Visiting schools, talking at churches, a couple of universities or other organizations, and a number of them did fundraisers for clean water wells or organic gardens, even some smaller fundraisers, just building bridges so kids can cross safely and go to school. And by the end of the tour, we had raised more than $25,000 collectively among all of those schools and organizations to help Tantoh finish his Eco Lodge, which is an education center and where international volunteers can stay. The students of Auburn, New York, raised money for a water system at the Eco Lodge, which is now servicing a whole neighborhood. And where that is right in the middle of the political conflict that's going on in Cameroon. So this tour was was really important for a community in crisis at this moment. That this book is so much more than a book and learning, for students here and inspiration for students here. It's hopefully that money is life changing and life saving for people on the ground. And Tantoh is able to go back, and then his 23 years of hard work that he's been building this movement with young people is something that he can see, it's worth it.
And Tantoh came to the U.S. and he was on this book tour.
Yes, he
with
was
you.
on tour with us. And for me, I think this book represents a call to action. And I saw along the way while we were on tour, so many kids in so many school districts stepping up to the plate because the kids want to change the world. They want to make the world a better place. There were, 3 girls in the Green Bay area who heard us speak at church, and those kids raised money for a bridge so the kids could cross during heavy rains, so the kids could have safe access to get to school.
It was a softball team.
It was a softball team. 3 girls ended up rallying their softball team to do that. Miranda mentioned Auburn. We just got another email that another school did a con drive for over $1,000 just to help with water projects in Cameroon. For me, it's just the power of our children. Sometimes we as adults, we disregard the important role that our children play because the world we are living in, it's theirs. They're the future, and they're going to lead this world. And I'm very proud to say that I'm really happy that maybe I'll be around to see how much those kids change this world, because I know that they're going to do it, because I have seen it firsthand, how powerful these children are around the country. Kudos to them.
Being able to work with, writing a biography about a living person. So this is the 3rd one that I've been writing while the subject of my biography is alive. Is challenging for sure, but also rewarding. When Tantoh came with us to the schools and he would start talking about how it doesn't rain a drop for 5 straight months out of the year and how the riverbeds dry up, we had an entire auditorium of kindergartners at one point that were silent. You could hear a pin drop, and they were really thinking about what that would be like, or that your chore before and after school every day, you have to walk a mile to get water. Then you have to carry that bucket back, probably on your head. And that's actually the most comfortable way, just to get the water for your family. And looking at a 5-gallon bucket and realizing that for some families, that might be all the water they have to share with their family for a day. It was so interesting to see how at the end of that, their first response wasn't, "Oh, that's so terrible. I have a wonderful life." Their first response was, "What can I do to help?" And a lot of adults would tell us, "This is so great because now the kids will know how lucky they are." But that is not the sentiment we wanted from Adventures to School or I Am Farmer. We don't want people to read about someone else's misfortune or pain and feel sympathy. We want exactly how the kids naturally react. They say, "Well, that doesn't seem quite right. I have all the water I want. What can I do to jump in and help?" Or sometimes the kids' questions are, "Well, do they play soccer like me?" "Oh, they do? Okay, great. I want to go there and play with them." And they have sort of an instant kinship versus looking at things from levels of this place or this person is on a different level. They look at the commonalities, or they look at, well, I'm in a position to do something, and then they feel really empowered as well, because kids are constantly feeling sometimes like people say no, or I can't do anything to change, and here they are. All they have to do is put a sign next to the water fountain that says take a sip, leave a tip, and they can raise $2,000 in a couple of weeks.
I know, right?
I mean, it was incredible to see. There's a couple students who will get an idea and they'll lead something like that from the time that we left their school till the time their school year just ended, and they've raised a couple of $1,000s, which goes a really long way in northwestern Cameroon.
Yeah, because one of the messages we ended the book tour with, at each school, at the end of our presentations, we challenge each school, each child to go out and grow a movement, go out and create a better world, and those kids jump right on top of it. And just as a symbol, we gave the school seeds, little packs of seeds so they could grow. And while they are growing the seed, they can go out and grow that movement. And before we were even out the door, kids were already rushing to us. I have ideas how I can clean up my own neighborhood in Nebraska, Omaha, Nebraska. Get my friends involved. We can go out and pick up trash. We can plant gardens. We can plant fruits and vegetables and give to the elderly. These are our children I'm talking about. The future.
And I think that brings it back to why we're all in this sphere of the children's book world, children's publishing, is you can see, you can have hope that books can change lives and have an impact.
Absolutely.
They sure do.
So what's next? You mentioned your We Need Diverse Books project is coming in the fall.
In the fall, thank you. Poems of Gratitude is coming out this fall. I see several highlights, people who've been to highlights who are in it as well. And of course, it's benefiting We Need Diverse Books. So we hope that it does really well and it can generate money. I run a program there, the mentorship program at We Need Diverse Books, because I think mentorship is very valuable to upcoming voices. In the fall, I also have a book called Little Libraries, Big Heroes coming out. And I see that Highlights has put in a little free library.
Yes.
So it's about Todd Bowl and Rick Brooks and how that got started and how it's spread around the world to more than 80 countries now, and how, you know, these little libraries are taken care of by heroes, basically called stewards, who make sure that there's book access in all corners of the world, you know, in big cities, but near our U.S.-Mexico border, in countries that might be, you know, torn by war, or very remote areas of different countries, in jails. My bank has one as you walk in. Just getting the culture of reading and books to be so commonplace that we never have to fear that books are going to be a thing on the way out the door. And it's remarkable just to see, this book's not even out yet, and how many people are emailing saying, I need a copy for my little free library, or our school is putting in a little free library. And that's, I think, one of the tips I give the writers who are here is, when you're passionate about a subject, that passion transfers into your writing, and other people want to grab that book and do something because of the book, or they want to talk about that subject. And if you can get someone who wasn't interested or didn't know anything about it at all before, if you can get them talking about it, you can get any child picking up that book, because I think children are naturally inquisitive. And then this fall, I also get to receive an honor award. My book that just came out, called 9 Months Before a Baby is Born, illustrated by Jason Chin, got a Boston Globe Hornbook honor for nonfiction.
Congratulations.
So it's been really exciting to tell the attendees here about how that book was a 10-year process. Again, I'm usually take a long time for my books, but it just sometimes takes that long for the vision of a book to form in your head. And that's why I give people the advice is maybe have more than one project constantly that you're working on, because you never know if the one you're working on is going to take 5 or 7 or 10 years. You can be rotating sort of between some of your different passion projects, and that's the way to sustain a career.
Good one. I like the what next question. You know, I think right now I want to do a lot more traveling and speaking. So within the next year, I will be doing a lot of that, because I think I have a lot to share with the world from my experiences and my background. So my books will help me deliver that message. And Miranda and I sold a new book. We've not signed the contract yet, but we sold.
I don't think we can quite announce that.
Yeah, but we sold a new
Coming
book.
soon.
Coming soon.
Yeah.
Actually, coming in like 2022. You know, nothing ever happens
right?
soon
Yeah,
in the picture book world.
Yeah, I have another book coming out somewhere in 2021, and it's just a hiking. That's what I can say for now. It's a hiking story. It's about this young lady right there, my daughter and I. So it was a family hiking trip, but she is the main character in the book. And I am working on 2 books right now. I'm editing 2 books right now. My agent just emailed me and she said, I need a 1 to 2 sentence pitch for each book. And I need it now so I can send it out on submission. So we're always working on something, but I think for me, it's really important that I do a lot more speaking gigs and traveling so I can just get the word out there.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both, Miranda and Baptiste, for joining us in the cabin Studio 4 at the Highlights Foundation Retreat Center.
I've never been in Studio 4 before, and I've been here so many times. It's like now I think I might do some more exploring.
Before we head back to the barn, one last question. I wonder if there is a book recommendation you might have for our listeners, something you've read recently, or maybe something that's on your wish list that you'd like to read.
Does it have to be children's, adults?
You know, anything that's kind of comes to mind when I ask you about some book that you've recently encountered.
Well, I am working on a book about space that's going to come out in 2021, and I have been reading all things space in the last probably 5 years. And I really love Neil deGrasse Tyson, but his book, Astrophysics for People in a Hurry, is brilliant. I love when people who have this vast, complex scientific knowledge can distill it in a way that the general population can read. I will say it's a little bit, maybe it's a little lofty to say the general population will like that, but if you're at all interested in space and some of the amazing discoveries of the last 15 years especially, that book is a quick read. I literally read it on vacation at the beach.
Perfect.
So the one thing I'm really looking forward to coming out in the fall is Thank You Poems of Gratitude. This book is so well illustrated by Melena, and I just can't wait for the world to see her talent. It just blew my mind, and I cried. I do have a poem in there, and I cried when I saw how well she illustrated it. This book is just amazing, and I can't wait until everybody gets their hands on this book.
There are 3 young people's poet laureates, past, present, and future in this book
Wow.
as well.
Yes.
So you've got Margarita Engel, you've got Naomi Shihab-Nye, and Ken Nesbitt. Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you both, Miranda and Baptiste, for joining us on Into the Words, Highlights Foundation podcast. We are dedicated to continuing our 35-year history of providing the space, the conversations, and the nurturing that goes into making great stories for children. Thank you for everything you do to support the Highlights Foundation, but more importantly, for what you do to support that belief that children are the world's most important people.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.